大爆殺しダイナマイトだ。
Hot tour, and I'm here to ask you one question, and one question only. Explosions! Because reasons!
What's going on, everybody? Just Haley here, and today I'm bringing you guys the Nova build that I've been working on for a little bit, mostly on stream, but some small changes that I've made to this. So if you guys think I know what I'm doing, I barely do. So that's really how that goes. Anyway, this is a really fun build. I've been having a blast, no pun intended. We're working with this one and really bringing it to life with Nova. She's been so much fun to kind of play around with and make this build work. I struggled with it before, but I found a new way to kind of run with it a little bit that not only made it more survivable, but just really, really fun. I'm not usually one for really, really spam heavy, caster heavy frames, but kind of starting from a question someone had asked during stream about like what frames are really good casters, I wanted to make this and try to make it into the best caster possible, and I really do like it. It's so much fun. It's really, really, really easy to do. Even with my lack of desire to press a ton of buttons, it's very easy to play. It runs with a bunch of different weapons, or at least it can, and it's just a really, really fun build. So the general principle here is that antimatter drop got a crazy buff when Nova got her rework, so did Nullstar, so we're going to be trying to make sure we get the best of both of those. We already, and I'm sure you guys hopefully already know, that the Nullstar is treated as a weapon, which means that it's buffed by your Nourish. So Nourish is a really, really strong buff right now for Nullstar, because not only are they going to do heat when you add in your neutron star augment, they're going to do blast and all that kind of stuff as well. They're also going to apply viral, which is going to amplify damage to those enemies for their health and their armor. It's a really strong effect overall, but it also amplifies the base damage in general. It's just really strong. You add in all of this together with the fact that Nova has her speed and her slow, and she works really well with teams for that, so you can speed up things like defenses, especially with them getting a little bit shorter coming up in March with the 3-wave defense instead. So that's really cool. You can also make the spawns feel a little bit better on survivals, but if you want to, because of the AoE of this build, you can still do Slova and make things a little bit more survivable, a little easier to survive for her if you choose. You can see that I'm running Slova right now for that. The main thing that is going to be here is going to be using Nourish, not just for that effect though, but also the energy regen, because it is a very, very spammy build. In about 2 hours, it was about 2,400 abilities during that time, which seems like a lot, and it definitely is, but it feels so much nicer than it sounds, and I promise you, if you try it out, it will be a lot of fun. So without further ado, let's get right into the build. Now, obviously, first and foremost, like I said, we're going with Nourish. There is another alternate to this build that isn't necessarily endless explosions. It's going to be a little bit more survivable, and you're going to make a couple changes. We'll get to that too. That one's going to use Pillage. Pillage is a really good subsume on Nova because her Nullstar 90% damage reduction works on all of the overshields she gets from Pillage. If you want the tankiest, most survivable, and just a really strong Nova in general who can weapon platform really well, especially with things like melee influence, I personally recommend the Pillage build. If you're going for longer missions, Pillage is really, really strong for that. But if you want to have a lot of fun and just really go in and do some good damage, big AoE, really fun blast kind of stuff going on, this is what I would recommend, and that is Nourish. Now, the reason that I recommend Nourish is because we are actually going to use a mod that I normally don't like, And that mod, of course, is Energy Nexus. Now, Energy Nexus combines really well with Nourish. It's going to give us a lot of energy per second. What that's going to end up doing is it's going to make sure that we can constantly keep our Nourish up. We constantly have our Null Star to be able to recast if we want. We can throw out Antimatter Drop pretty much at our leisure and still use our Molecular Prime to switch back and forth as we please, as well as to prime the entire map in case we're not really liking the typical gameplay loop that this build runs. Now for survivability, we're going Brief Respite, Catalyzing Shields, and Augur Reach with an Arcane Aegis for automatic shield gating from time to time. If you're feeling a little bit more frisky, a little bit more aggressive, you can swap out that Arcane Aegis. You could run something that is going to be a little bit more like Arcane Avenger or something like that. Arcane Arachne is a really big damage buff for your Null Star. So those kinds of things do work really well if you want to. I prefer the more cautious approach since this build does tend to be so aggressive anyway. We're also doing a stretch mod here just to give us a little bit more range. If you want to run augur mods in general on your secondary, you can do that and drop the augur reach. You'll lose a little bit of range, but that'll give you room for something like rolling guard for, again, that more survivability if that's something you value. Now, Neutron Star and Molecular Fission work so well together. Neutron Star is going to give us some amazing heat procs in a large AoE. We're also going to be getting the Molecular Fission, which is going to give us all of our Null Stars back whenever we're killing enemies that are primed, which also means the Null Star is going to prime enemies, which is how you get the core loop of this build, which is press 1, press 2, prime the antimatter drop with your 2, so typically that's going to be shoot it, or you can use something like a thrown weapon into the ball that will prime it as well. Strongly recommend shotguns for making the antimatter drop soak up all that damage really easily, and then you press 2 one more time. So it's 1, 2, shoot, 2, and it's very, very easy, very fluid, very simple, and it works really well. You could also, if you wanted to prime the full map, do 4, 2, shoot 2, 4, 2, melee 2 as well. That's your general gameplay loop. Keep your nourish up at all times and you're never going to run out of energy. It's very, very simple. Now for this build, we do want to make sure we have a bunch of strength and a bunch of duration. That's going to be a big piece of this. So we do run blind rage. We don't care about the efficiency. This is going to be fine. And then I do run primed continuity for the extra duration. The other thing that I do like running here is primed sure-footed. Now the reason I run primed sure-footed is because I do, as you can see in the gameplay, love running my Wolf Sledge. Wolf Sledge is a thrown melee. If you hold the melee key in, you can then detonate it in the air. Those explosions will knock you down, so I do strongly recommend prime sure-footed here. If you don't have it, you can use something like Power Drift or Cunning Drift to get more strength with Power Drift, as well as that 30% chance to ignore knockdown. You could use Handspring to get that knockdown recovery a little bit faster, or you could use Cunning Drift to give you a little bit more range, which is also very nice for this build. It'll allow your blast procs, heat procs, all that stuff to overlap, which just feels really clean, and it cleans up the gameplay of the build really nicely. I love it. I think it's really great. Now for shards, I like to go in with my 2 ability strength and 1 duration. That's just to hit some specific breakpoints for our shards. I also really value that extra equilibrium shard just to enable a little bit more energy recovery, just in case maybe you get hit by something that's going to reduce your energy. Maybe you just spent a little bit more. Maybe you forgot to press your nourish. I do it a lot. That's just a really comfort thing. If you wanted to go for more duration, more strength, that would be really good, but that's just nice to have. I also personally value cast speed a lot on this build because you are casting so much, and I do think it feels really good, especially with Molecular Prime. Just speeding it up a little bit can feel really, really good. It can go a really long way. Now these shards also enable the other build that I do really like running on Nova, and that is the Pillage build. While it's not the one I'm going to be showing gameplay of, and it's definitely not in the same theme, I am going to show you guys that build just in case you want something a little bit tankier, a little bit more survivable. It's definitely a good option. So what we're going to be doing with that one is running Pillage instead of the Antimatter Drop. I do like the portals. I think it's a fun little thing to do. It also synergizes really well with what we're running here. We're going a little bit of range with the Augur Reach. You don't have to do that if you don't want to. I just like it for that little bit of extra shields back if you ever do need to use it in a pinch. Plus, the range isn't crazy important for this build specifically. Keeping Molecular Fission, Neutron Star, though they're not going to be really superstars here, no pun intended. But what we are going to be doing for that is just making sure that our Null Star stays up all the time and that we're getting the most value possible out of that Neutron Star. If you want to drop one of those, drop Neutron Star to run something else, completely up to you. If you want to drop Adaptation, you can. I just like it because when you have so much overshield from Pillage, it does feel kind of good. Adaptation, as we've talked about on stream, mostly good for impact, puncture, slash. So if you're looking for something more survivable, it could be better potentially to run Rolling Guard, though oftentimes I don't really find myself losing the shields from Pillage. What I will find myself doing is stepping into Toxin procs or pools of Toxin. However, that typically means that I'm running against Infested, and I'm not going to bring a Pillage build to Infested. It would be kind of silly. If you do, though, you can clear statuses with Pillage, so it might just be better to keep on the Adaptation. I do keep Flow on here, and that's because I run Energize. It's an easy way to max out your energy pool. You could spam your Molecular Prime with this build. You also then want to make sure that you are running the Umbral Intensify to give you a little bit more strength. That way we would pair it with the Corrosive Projection, and that gives us just enough strength once we have our Molt Augmented stacked up to give us a full armor strip really easily. Overall, that's not super important nowadays, but it is very good, and I do really like it. That's a personal preference thing. If you wanted to run something like Brief Respite, you certainly could. If you wanted to run Growing Power, you could, though the strength isn't going to give you as much value at that point. Now, Molt Augmented just has tons of synergy with Nova. It's very easy for her to get kills, especially when you are earlier in a mission and all of your kills are just going to chain from the blast damage she does. It's one of the reasons that range does work well on her. Just a little bit of extra range goes a really long way, allowing those blasts to kind of stack up. You'll hear really, really wonderful sound design explosions across the map. It's super, super fun, super, super easy to do, and it's just a really fun build. Now, just as a refresher, I do want to say the main way that you play this build is just make sure your Nourish is up. As long as your Nourish is up, you're going to be able to do the rest of the gameplay loop. That gameplay loop is Molecular Prime if you want to do a full map or a big area, or you have extra energy, or you just feel comfy to do it. Outside of that, you're going to press 1 to Molecular Prime enemies right in front of you with your Null Star. Big explosions on that should allow it to kind of cascade the priming really easily. So you're going to press 1. Then 2, that's your antimatter drop. Once your antimatter drop is out, you can see I just put a really quick couple of shots into it. That is going to allow that ball to be as charged as it can be, so I can then throw it into the enemies for millions of damage in that AoE, all stacking up in a ton of numbers. Really, really satisfying and pretty beautiful to see, if I do say so myself. It's just really strong. It's a very, very easy gameplay loop. It is literally 1, 2, shoot, 2. Very, very simple. Or 4, 2, shoot, 2, 2, shoot, 2, 2, shoot, 2, and that's if you do the Molecular Prime. Both of them work very well. Both of them are equally viable. Just depends on how you want to play it. The Null Star is going to passively prime things as well because you have some extra range here, so they are going to fly off and hit enemies in general, but being able to press the button to make sure that they are flying off all at once is really good. We're also running the extra duration to give us up to 20 particles, which is very strong by itself, just giving us a ton of particles flying around the screen and making sure Nova always has her damage reduction up. That 90% goes a really long way. As for what weapons to use, personally, any shotgun should work pretty well. High multi-shot and high base damage, though, are your main goals. So I am using the Felarx here. Run a really standard Felarx build with your extra damage when you don't crit, and you'll have a really, really good base damage build for this. That means you should be able to prime really easily. Other things with high damage and good multi-shot, so like the Sakaris that I'm also using here, fill it pretty quickly, and then if your pet is attacking, it'll also end up getting a couple shots potentially in there, so be careful of that. That can be a little annoying sometimes if you are using Duplex or something along those lines, where they might accidentally start charging up that. You want to make sure that you're hitting it with your weapons. That's going to do more damage in general. For the pet, I don't really want to focus on it too much because it doesn't matter for this build. Run whatever Sentinel you want, but I am using the Nautilus and I haven't used that before, so I'm going to show you my Nautilus build here. It's pretty simple. We're just going to be using Cordon. The rest of it is kind of standard, and it's just what I kind of use on most of my Sentinels. We really want Cordon and Guardian running. As long as those are good, we're good to go. Keep in mind, Cordon does not do damage by itself, so if you're trying to get value out of your Manifold Bond, that's not necessarily going to work that well for priming. However, you will be able to use something something like Coolant Leak over Duplex if you wanted to. The other thing that we're going to make sure that we have to have is Assault Mode. Again, you could use Coolant Leak over Assault Mode if you're not worried about the Sentinel necessarily attacking, though I do really like the Artax spread that it has. That is pretty nice for being able to freeze enemies. Now, I did specifically select Nautilus here just because of the grouping, though oftentimes, and you'll see it a lot of the time, the grouping ends up being more of a detriment than anything else. It pulls enemies towards me instead of leaving them with the group that they're already in. So overall, not crazy useful, and honestly, a little bit worse than the Taxon in general, because you're losing the survivability of the Taxon just to get that cordon piece, which isn't as good. Now, the last thing I'm going to have for you guys today is my Wolf Sledge build. You guys might know that this is a thrown weapon. You guys might not have it. It comes from the Wolf of Saturn 6, which you can get through Nightwave. The beacons are farmable through that, so keep that in mind. I love the Wolf Sledge. The way that it throws is really fun. It's my favorite thrown weapon, especially because it can run melee influence, unlike a lot of the glaives, which tend to prefer things like melee exposure, just for extra base damage. It tends to allow them to do more, sometimes melee animosity, but you just get a little bit more mod freedom, which allows me to run this really heavy crit, but also really heavy attack focused build with then even still being able to add my melee influence. I've tried it with animosity, I've tried it with exposure, I've tried it with afflictions, and overall it just was never as good as running it with melee influence, in my opinion. Obviously, play around with it, see what you like. Maybe you won't like that build. I really like the ability to just kind of hit enemies with it, even without having to detonate, and being able to cause chain reactions across the map. Now, the really fun thing here is that you can throw, like I said, not necessarily detonate the heavy attack, so when it hits the enemies, you can detonate and do a little bit of a melee double tap, a throw maxing, if you will. It's a lot of fun, it's very strong, but you can also just let it hit, continue to build up combo, and then use your Tennokai for the heavy attacks. That's always an option. And honestly, that really is it for this video. If you liked it, please remember to leave a like, comment, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. If you guys check it out, please let me know what you think. I love Nova. Her new rework is great. The main reason I didn't put a video out earlier is just because I kind of thought everything was already done with her and most people already had their build set. But I kept getting asked questions about what I was doing with her and how I was messing with her and stuff like that. So I decided to put this video out because it was requested so much during stream. So if you guys ever have frames you want to see, please leave comments and all that kind of stuff. It's the only way that I'll know you want to see them. Aside from that, guys, thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful day, and until next time, please remember that I love your faces. Bye, y'all.